Hey, Dave Ferry here, and this presentation is about building waterways on your model railroad or diorama. This presentation started life as a clinic I presented to the Model Railroad Expo. Many of the techniques I'll be presenting here, and a lot more, can be found on my DVD called Building Waterways. I'll talk about building streams, ponds, rivers, harbors, and even waterfalls. Now I'm going to assume that you have the basic skills to build the scenic base or landform to make the pond bottom or stream bottom on. I'll be showing you a variety of materials, some new and some familiar, that I've used for building over 31 model railroad projects to date. I'll talk about a variety of gloss acrylic mediums and gloss acrylic gels. And I'll discuss how to use two-part epoxies. I use mostly art and craft store acrylic products to build water. The only hobby shop item is the Woodland Scenics water effects on the left. This is basically the same as the golden gel medium, but in a better dispenser and a lot more expensive. The items pictured are the ones I use most for building water. If you're shopping in a craft store, look for gloss acrylic medium or gel. The best all-around gloss medium for water building is Mod Podge. It also is available in art and craft stores. It's white and it looks like mayonnaise, but it dries perfectly crystal clear and is very glossy. Now make sure that you read the label and purchase the gloss variety. You'll also need several water-making brushes. Here are a few that I like. On the left are two sizes of fan brush, and the fan brushes are great for forming and then shaping waves. I also like the black bristled brush, which is called an extra large round mop. It has very soft bristles and is good for plopping on Mod Podge to get gently rolling water. On the right is a makeup brush. It's similar to the round mop, only much softer. Here's the way Mod Podge looks on a painted water surface after it's been pushed around with a combination of the fan brush and the round mop. When the Mod Podge dries, it will be clear and very glossy. Brushing on Mod Podge is the basic way I build water, and all the rest of the information in this presentation will expand upon adding gloss acrylic medium over a painted water base. Let's start with the first example, the easiest one, which is building streams. These can be deep or shallow or just a trickle in the woods. First, you need to build the banks. And here's the beginning of a stream on a high rail layout. I used pink styrofoam and pre-painted foam rocks to build the base. I've since learned that any type of styrofoam is not a good water base. The new styrofoams outgas over time and they'll ruin your water. They'll fill the acrylic gel with little bubbles that'll eventually turn black. So your best bet is to use a hard board as a water base like masonite, plywood, or gator board. I like to build and paint the details first on the workbench and then install them on the model railroad. This retaining wall and culverts was made from the Scenic Express urethane rock walls. Sculpt A Mold is my favorite all-around scenery building product. It's available in most arts and crafts stores, and Sculpt A Mold is a lightweight, clay-based, plaster-like product which mixes with water. It's easy to use and will stick to most surfaces. It sets hard and it dries with little or no shrinkage. And it can be mixed to make a loose mixture that can be brushed on the scenery, or it can be mixed stiff like mortar, and it can be troweled into place. It sets in about 30 minutes and dries hard overnight. The surface texture when it's dry reminds me of either sandpaper or cottage cheese, and you can smooth it to make concrete walls and roads. Acrylic paint and white glue can be mixed with Sculpt A Mold to color it and to give it extra strength. I've also added small amounts of sand and other textures to get specific effects like a rough desert terrain. Well, let's get back to our stream bed. A trench was carved in the styrofoam scenery base, and the sides and bottom of the stream were shaped using Sculpt A Mold. Rocks from the garden were pushed into the wet Sculpt A Mold. A stiff china bristle brush works great to shape the Sculpt A Mold. The bank and base of this river was made from Sculpt A Mold, and while it was still wet, I pushed stones into the river bottom. These were painted to tone down the red California earth color. These are the acrylic colors I use to paint rocks and riverbanks. I mix them together on a scrap of cardboard to get a rock color I like. I usually start by mixing black and white to make a gray, and then I add umber or sienna to warm the gray color. You can use these four colors to duplicate almost any rock or earth color. On this HO layout, I used the four basic colors to make a warm granite color that was painted on the rocks and along the edge of the stream bed. At this point, if you haven't already done so, you'll also need to determine an earth color for your layout. And the way I do it is to select a color that matches the prototype, glue some of the dirt on a white card and bring it to the paint store. Tell the salesperson that you want flat, indoor wall paint. Here I've diluted my earth color, which is kind of a match for Floquill's earth color. I've diluted it with a little water to color the sand under the bridge and in the shallow beach area beside it. This under construction photo shows the early stages of a display I built for the Nantucket Whaling Museum. In the photo, you can see how the earth color was blended into the painted water base to give the illusion of shallow water. I only use 4 acrylic colors to paint the water bottom. I use titanium white, black or Payne's gray, cerulean blue, and medium green. These 4 colors cover almost every water circumstance. If you need muddy water, I add a little bit of the earth color to the water mix. You can also find basic watercolors and a lot more at the craft store. Buy a few and try them. You might find a color that you like better for your water base. For this quiet harbor, I used apple barrel colors from the craft store. Black, white, cerulean blue, medium green, and a little raw umber. And I used that to represent the shallow areas around the rocks. Here are the 4 watercolors stippled over hardboard to make the base for a lake. To paint the water base, I use cheap china bristle brushes. Here I'm using the brush in a stabbing motion to mix and blend the darker, deeper water area with the shallow beach area. Here's a good example of all things I've talked about so far. The rocks and riverbanks were painted with earth-colored paint. The rocks along the water edge were highlighted with a mixture of the 4 rock colors. The water base is cerulean blue and black with a little bit of green dabbed here and there. And the white Mod Podge, which has been brushed over the river, will dry clear, and it'll look sparkling. Here the stream banks have been painted with earth color. After they dried, I highlighted and dry brushed the banks using mixtures of white, black, sienna, and umber to produce highlights and shadows. Mod Podge was mixed with a little cerulean blue and brushed into the riverbed to create the water. This stream was in the back of a layout, so I could get away with using bold colors and textures. I mixed black, white, and cerulean blue with Mod Podge to produce a rushing water effect in a stream bed. This stream was built on a flat surface. The banks were just piles of rocks and gravel mixed with dilute white glue. Sculpt A Mold was used to build the landforms behind the banks. The stream bottom was painted as described before with the 4 colors. Let's talk about ponds. Most of the time you'll just want a flat, plain Jane water surface for a pond. This is where vacuum formed plastic, 1/8 inch plexiglass, masonite, foam core board, or any other kind of hard flat surface comes into play. This pond bottom here is the plywood top of a ping pong table. The surrounding banks of the pond were built up to give the illusion that the pond is lower than what's around it. I filled the plywood pond bottom with spackle, let it dry, and then sanded it smooth. I primed it with an earth-colored paint. Next, the bottom was painted with black, blue, and a little green, and when it dried, Mod Podge was applied. Here's Goose Pond on the ON30 Nantucket display. It was built on top of the scenery base, just like the previous ping pong table pond. The green reeds are branches cut from an O-gauge pine tree. There's not much difference between building ponds and rivers. Rivers seem to need some extra turbulence to show fast-flowing water. An overview of this fast-moving river shows how the Mod Podge was tested with a fan brush to give the appearance of moving water. This river could only be viewed from either end of this 12-foot-long model of Gore Canyon, so I intentionally added more blue to the gloss medium so that it would stand out from a distance. The rocks in the river are real and held in place with dilute white glue. The rock canyon walls are lightweight urethane foam castings. Here's an area a little farther down the river before the bridge was set in place. You can see how easy it is to add surface texture by pushing the gloss medium around with a soft brush. Well, everybody loves a well-modeled waterfall. Through experimentation, I've found 2 easy ways to produce them. But let's start with a smaller water effect first. The only hobby shop material that I use is Woodland Scenic's Water Effects. This is an acrylic gloss gel, like thick Mod Podge, and it's packaged in a squeeze bottle. It's very handy for making falling water effects because you can just squeeze it out and it usually stays put. Here's a good example of the value of water effects. The flowing water from the culvert was just squeezed out of the water effects bottle and allowed to dry. This small waterfall was built by squeezing water effects over the rocks and allowing it to dry. Here it is after it dried, and I added a few dabs of white paint to bring this fast-moving water to life. For a larger falling water, you'll need a base to hold the water effects or acrylic gloss gel. I mentioned 2 methods before. The first uses strips of clear acetate or styrene. These are cut to size with scissors. Several clear strips are glued to the overhanging rock using Mod Podge or gloss acrylic medium as an adhesive. Make sure the strips are straight up and down. You don't want a crooked waterfall. The next step is to add a little foam and turbulence to the strips by dabbing them with some white acrylic paint. After the white paint dries, I brush the whole waterfall with Mod Podge again. Here's the waterfall made from plastic strips with Mod Podge. I made a lot of turbulence by mixing a little white acrylic into the Mod Podge. The second way to make a waterfall is to take a plastic bag and streak water effects or acrylic gloss gel on it to look like falling water. You start by spreading the gloss medium onto the plastic bag with a squared-off tongue depressor. And what you're doing is carving parallel lines in the gel. You allow the first layer to dry, turn the bag over and do the same thing on the other side. Now you have a piece of plastic that looks like this. I cut a piece of the bag to fit the waterfall area, and I'll glue it in place with more gel medium. You don't need a brush for this. All you need is a popsicle stick or the handle of a paintbrush or any other kind of applicator. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the waterfall piece out of the scenery, put some more gloss acrylic gel on both the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to put it in place. And this is the permanent arrangement for it. As you can see, I'm spreading some of the acrylic gel on the bottom of the rock, and it's also on the top of the waterfall piece, and it'll hold it in place nicely. With a stiff brush, you can create the turbulence around the base of the falls. And after it dries for several days, I can streak it with white and another coat of gloss medium to get results like this. Here's a much larger falls that I built when I was experimenting with the gel products and with using plastic bags. After I trimmed one of them to size, I used these scraps to make a smaller waterfall. And here it is finished with white turbulence added. After the paint dried, I coated the whole river with Mod Podge to give it shine. And here's a small falls built in place using a piece of gel-coated plastic bag. And in this one, we're waiting for the Mod Podge to dry so that it will be clear. A small piece of the waterfall plastic was laid under the water wheel to show turbulence. One of the first water building materials that I was exposed to, other than high gloss boat varnish, was two-part epoxy called Envirotex. Envirotex is great for making high gloss, slow-moving, or still water. It's two-part, it's clear, one part is clear and one part is gold. It's a self-leveling epoxy and is available in craft, hobby, hardware, and some woodworking stores. It's more expensive than gloss medium, but it makes a great mirror-like water surface that's very durable. Envirotex is tricky to use, so for best results, read the instructions before you start. And if possible, turn up the heat in your train room. The warmer the room, the faster the Envirotex will cure. 85 degrees in the train room is ideal. Envirotex sets in 5 to 7 hours and cures completely in 72 hours. Try to keep dirt and dust off the surface until it cures. The water surface you make will be smooth and hard, and it's both water and alcohol resistant. Envirotex can be left as is, or waves, wakes, and ripples can be added over it using gloss medium. Magic Water is another two-part epoxy product that I've tried. It works as advertised, producing crystal clear, flat water that sparkles. Here's a finished harbor made with Envirotex. It created flat water to look like a windless day on the Maine coast. The Envirotex pond here was made using very simple techniques. I painted the deep water with flat black and painted around the edges with an earth-colored paint. Then I took a spray bottle of wet water, and while the paints were still wet, I misted the water so that the black could run into the earth and the earth into the black. The two colors flowed and mixed together. After they were completely dry, I poured on Envirotex. This is an example of the same techniques as in the previous photo, only in this backwater, I use more earth color on the base to get the look of shallow water. This Envirotex water was built on the Pensy layout. I sprinkled several sizes of pebbles in place on the river bottom and poured the epoxy over them to produce a clear stream. The Envirotex held the loose pebbles in place. This little duck pond was made with Magic Water. The scenery base for the park is a 1/4-inch foam core board, which I cut a hole in and then painted. I poured on just enough epoxy to come up to the edges, less than 1/8 of an inch. It's important that the layout be level so the epoxy will not run out on the floor. Here's another magic water stream. The clear epoxy lets you look under the water. It acts like a mirror and reflects the background back at you. The pond at the resort hotel was made by pouring magic water over painted masonite. And now my favorite part of building water, building harbors. And you know, harbors are just ponds with waves. Here's a combination of Envirotex and Mod Podge. The Envirotex was put down first, and the Mod Podge was added to produce surface waves. The harbor on this end of the Nantucket display was modeled using acrylic gel to create waves in rough water. Mod Podge was brushed over the waves to soften them and to smooth the surface. The most important part of this ON30 waterfront is the way the color of the ocean was treated. The waves, turbulence, and deep areas were painted in, and the surface texture was added using gloss gel. Painting in a rough ocean requires the colors we've used before, plus a fairly stiff bristle brush to blend them in a random way. I use a lot of white mixed with Mod Podge to create the highlights on the water and still keep it looking wet. Here's a close-up of the same area. You can see the brush marks on the painted on waves if you get real close. If you back up and view it from a normal viewing distance, you don't see them. Here's the same area on the same diorama, showing how Mod Podge was built up to show the current and water flow. Different lighting shows how titanium white was added to show a lot of turbulence. One more time, I'm going to repeat everything we've done so far, but add a new twist: waves. The bottom is painted to give the illusion of water crashing on the rocks. This means adding a lot of acrylic green and white to the cerulean blue. Using the wave pattern that I painted on the bottom, I pushed Mod Podge or piled it into waves using the tip of a fan brush. Here's the wave effect I got. The waves can be made bigger by adding another layer or two of Mod Podge. Extreme waves can be made by adding Mod Podge in 4 or 5 layers. The trick here is to wait until each layer of waves dries before you add the next one. Here's our waterfront. Mod Podge is very effective for simulating rough water. And that's about it. Now you know what I know about building water. Have fun! And if you'd like more water building information, I have my new DVD available from my website, which is mrscenery.com. Or for the complete story about every aspect of scenery building, please check out my scenery book, also available from my website. That's it. Thanks for watching.